Hello and welcome to Dual Citizens. My name is David Ould.
And my name's Stephen McAlpine.
That's right, it is. Welcome, Steve. You've left us again. We were in the studio together last week, last time we met, and now off again. Where are you gallivanting off to this week?
Well, I'm in the Witness Relocation Program. Now, I'm actually doing a tour of Australia, and I'm for speaking about church and the future for a group, and I'm in a ubiquitous hotel setting every day in a different city.
Excellent. Well, it's a shame you're not here because you're missing the merch. We now have merch. I've got my Dual Citizens mug.
Well, I feel like
tastes even better
because I'm stateless.
Yeah, I've got your mug as well. So if it's just going to sit over here, kind of just lonely and waiting for you to come back. What are we talking about this week, Stephen?
We're going to talk about theological anthropology, and if that sounds like you could turn off right now, I'm really looking at the question, we're going to look at the question that's coming up all the time. What does it mean to be human? And why is so much of our legislative, cultural, political, social setting really having hot button issues around what it means to be human? And we're going to specifically look at the issue of the Democrats' convention and the issue around rights of the mum versus rights of a baby, the abortion issue, which has just blown up again in the US.
It has, and we'll be thinking about something closer to home here in Australia as well. It's different topic, same underlying issue. Let's get down to it. All right, Steve, you've got a shiny new website. Glad to see that. I hope you've been enjoying yourself on there. I know you have because I've been reading some of your blogs and a couple of them got a lot of interest, particularly one that you wrote where you said the Democrats in America, they're now gleeful about abortion in a way that they were not before. What did you mean by that? And what happened when you wrote those words?
Well, I wrote the words specifically because I hear people say, well, you can vote for Trump, but you've got to hold your nose and vote for him. And there were people saying, never, he's beyond the pale. And I thought, what about a thought experiment? Because I don't write about abortion very much. If I flipped that and said Christians can hold their nose and vote for the Democrats, even though this is a confronting anti-biblical stance they're taking on abortion. And I got a lot of pushback about that. Lots of comments. I don't usually comment on my Facebook. Then I got private messages saying, help me understand how that's as important as these other issues. And that for me was a case of, I don't think you're looking at anthropology through a theological lens that's got a transcendent framework of what it means to be human. I think you're looking at anthropology through a justice lens that's very secular. And even then it's skewed. And I think that was pushing Christians to say, do we even think about any of these big issues theologically? And I think in terms of abortion, we've been sequestered into a very secular understanding and response to it.
Yeah. So let's think that one through. So let's go to the US where obviously that's been working out at the moment. Why is it such a central issue, therefore, in the United States, the whole abortion thing? Because it seems to be, I think you were saying to me just before, it's kind of the only policy issue that was raised on the platform at the whole convention. Yeah. I mean, it seemed to me the whole thing was about joy, and then specifically joy about abortion. But why is it such a big issue there?
Yeah, first on that, Carl Trueman wrote about it in First Things. Why is there such glee? And then I read a really interesting article in the Times. It was funny, a take on the Dems convention in their usual whimsical kind of opinion piece. But the lady there who wrote that just said, there's only one, it's a policy-free zone except for abortion. It was exceptionally incredible, intriguing to me. The thing about American politics is that they're shaped by an argument over principles, where Australia is shaped by arguments over, no arguments about pragmatics. What can we do? Whereas American politics is how should we think and act about these, think about these things before we act on them. The question I have is, how did it move from the Clintons, safe, legal and rare, who, by the way, weren't safe, legal and rare at the convention, they were everywhere, and to where we are today? And if Christians on the more progressive framework don't stop and raise some questions about that, I think they've been suckered into a secular understanding of the anthropological issues.
Right. So how is it therefore then part of that bigger anthropology question? So just tease through what you're thinking about that stuff.
Well, it's about personhood
Mm-hmm.
and who gets to define personhood. So much of what we've seen in the last 8 to 10 years, especially around the marriage issue, for example, is governments can redefine something that was there before government, an understanding of marriage that's pre-government, I think. And also we are looking at humans and saying it's about competing rights. And so what was interesting, I read another article in the Australian today from a Melbourne University academic who said, in a sense, even though it's not equivalent to slavery, the same issue was being made in the South during that period, that if you take away that right, you're taking away a central part of how we think about our identity as collectively and who we are as people going forward. So personhood was taken away from the slave. And he said, well, it's not exactly the same equivalent, but when personhood is taken away from a group that you don't want to have personhood, that is a very shaping thing for you as a culture.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's about who is a person, and then by implication, who then is not. I remember when the abortion debate was raging here in New South Wales a while ago, when of all governments, the Liberal government pushed through a radical decriminalisation of it. Like technically here in New South Wales, abortion without limit at any age. I did make the parallels with the slavery thing. I think it's a key parallel. I even might be tempted to say, Steve, which is worse, to enslave someone or to take their life?
Choose your poison in that sense.
Choose your poison, right? In that sense. But why one?
Yeah. And it is poisonous, right? So it shapes how we think about everything else. And that's what I was trying to say in my blog post. You can't firewall off an extreme ethical position from the rest of how you think.
Right.
That is a canary in the mine shaft of what you actually think about things in general.
It's not,
so people are writing me saying, well, what about these other issues? Well, I talk about them all the time.
Yeah, that's right.
Why don't you talk about this one? Oh, no, that's firewalled from any conversation. Oh, is it? Do you not think that it will shape you? And Rod Dreher has said that even after Roe v. Wade, and the progressive, smart writers realised it too, that after Roe v. Wade was struck down, America would still be generally pro-abortion.
Yeah. And so,
and it is.
And you've just had the states that don't want it legislating against it, and the states that do going for it, which was, I guess, that's what was at stake there. So that's America. Let's think about Australia, where you and I live. Although you see more of it at the moment with your gallivanting around.
I'm in the state, right? I'm actually in the state, Queensland, that a few weeks ago had a hearing of parliamentarians around the issue of the fact that there've been 800 documented cases of postpartum babies who've been aborted, being alive and left to die.
Wow!
And the nurse giving evidence on that was in tears. And she said how she tried to care for these babies as they cried. And the parliamentary group still voted down any legislation that would protect them. So
why, Steve? Yeah. Like, that just seems to me, I was reading something the other day just going, even babies now born somewhere between 20 and 24 weeks have almost a 25% chance of survival. Like we're getting really good at looking after even these super preemie babies. So why, when the evidence is so clear, why is legislation not being changed?
It's a mental schizophrenia issue. If you want that child, it is humanized. And you see that in ads for mothers taking supplements. You see, the big companies that probably provide some of the abortion pills also create, products that allow you to make sure your baby is healthy. Your baby. And then it's also it's your baby. And that's to do with the individual nature of how we expressive individualism, the idea that I'm someone separate, but at the same time, this baby's, part of me. It's an odd mix. I've never heard a good argument about late-term abortion, but I have heard plenty of denial that it probably doesn't happen all that often. Yet we're doing postpartum. So you have to say that somewhere along the line, hate to use the term slippery slope, it's not the same as the 1970s sex ed classes I had back in Palmyra Primary School. Oh, it's just a clump of cells and it's, 10 weeks and we're done. And that's not happening. That's not how it is.
Right. And now we're a lot clearer, and not just clearer with the anatomy stuff. We need to be sharper on the theology itself, which is what will turn.
It's teleological.
Right? It is.
And that's what I've noticed. Stanley Hauerwas said if the Christians are the people who don't kill their young and they're old in 100 years' time, we'll be doing well. I'm going, 100 years? We're there. And so it is all the start of life, end of life, and life in the middle issues. And people push back, well, you don't care about life in the middle. Well, that's not true. But you are shown up as a community and a culture by how you treat those start of life and end of life issues. And I think they'll compress and people in the middle will be depersonalized as well. I think that is the inevitable result of a post-theological anthropology.
Well, let's turn to a depersonalizing here in Australia in a moment in terms of not being able to work out what sort of a person anybody is at all. That's coming up next.
Well, we're sticking to the topic of anthropology, but we're moving to one that David is entitled Tickle versus Giggle. Now, I remember a 2000s TV show for kids called Giggle and Hoot. I presume that's not what Tickle versus Giggle is. It sounds a bit adversarial. What's at stake here, Dave?
What's Tickle versus Giggle about? It's a fascinating case. So a lady called Sally Grover, a number of years ago produced an app for women only called the Giggle app. And it came out of her. She had survived a sexual abuse. And just realized she needed a safe space to talk about that and in general have a safe space with other women. So she sets up this app called Giggle and says it's for women and women only. And of course, as soon as she does it, there's this tirade of people. Well, she reports a whole bunch of misogyny and men, sort of all the things you can imagine going on. And then men trying to get onto the app. So they had a pretty clear screening process, including a bit of an AI photo recognition thing, which kind of they use to help screen as well. So it's all going along well, and they're sort of a women's space, and they're not letting men on. And then this transgender, so a male to female transitioned called Roxanne, calls herself affectionately Roxanne Tickle. So that's where the Tickle versus Giggle comes from. Roxanne,
this is made for television.
It is. It's perfect. The whole thing is just perfection. So Roxy Tickle joins. And at the start, it's fine. They're on this app and they're doing their thing. And then all of a sudden, I think it's Sally's father gets hold of this AI thing that can sort of scan the photographs. And for some reason, Roxy gets now barred struck off from the app because she looks like a man. Now, that's what it is, right? And there's a couple of rounds of trying to bit the correspondence, and then after a while, she decides that this is terrible, and she goes to the sex discrimination people, and
that's the word versus in Tickle versus Giggle.
Well, that's so
how did that work? How did that work?
Well, how did it work out? Well, she goes to the tribunal, and Giggle Grover decides they don't want any part of the mediation. So they just go, nah, not having any part to do with it. And so Tickle does the only thing that they think that's left to them is they go and actually, under the Sex Discrimination Act, just say, I've been discriminated against. And the ruling came out last week to say, yes, maybe you have. And so the judge ruled that Roxy Tickle had been indirectly discriminated against, and damages of $10,000 were awarded, and costs.
And what about entry to the Giggle
claim? I don't. It's interesting. I don't actually think that was in the ruling itself. I think it's the kind of thing where you just go, well, that's over and that's done with.
Let it wipe the smile off your face, right? So that's
well done. Well done. Yeah.
But I guess, I mean, the bigger question is this new view of sex and gender now embedded in our law?
Well,
and the system that upholds it? I mean, that seemed a very thin process you just described there. Well,
so the question is, did the judge get it wrong? And what's the law at? Well, in one sense, you want to go, no, the judge didn't get it wrong, because what the judge did is they went through the law. Interestingly, if you read the full ruling, which we'll link up in our show notes, the judge said that the discrimination body, the sex discrimination body, actually they were there as a third party advising the court on what discrimination was and what gender was, and so they ran the line. But even in the Sex Discrimination Act, the judge said it's very, very interesting. Well, let's try this one out since we're having a laugh together over this one. What's the one word that's not defined in the Sex Discrimination Act?
I'm going to guess woman.
Nope, it's even better than that.
No.
It's even better than that. What's the one word that's not defined in the Sex Discrimination Act?
sex or gender
Sex.
or
Sex.
discrimination.
And actually in the ruling, I laughed out loud when I was reading it. In the ruling, the judge goes, well, sex isn't defined. And so he then just falls.
It's a priori.
Yeah, it just falls back on this, basically, Roxanne Tickle. And in one sense, it's a helpful case because Roxanne Tickle has done the full transition. They've had the operations, they've had the hormones, they in every sense, they've had their birth certificate changed, which is a weird thing to go, how can you change the record of what happened way back then?
Well, propaganda, that's how.
Right. And so in one sense, the judge got it right because they just followed the law as the law currently stands. But the question has got to be, well, how have we ended at the point where that's our law? And Sally Grover, of course, is outraged. And I think,
well, I guess sorry, I was just going to say, in one sense, we're having to try and live with our deepest differences, and you have to legislate more and more when you take natural law out of the equation, don't you? We've got more legislation about everything because we don't have a common vision of what it means to be human any longer. So we have to bite-size it into smaller and smaller increments of legalism.
Yes, absolutely. And then also, getting back to the stuff we did with Truman, it's I become the arbiter of who I am. And so how dare you say that I'm not who I am, and a trans woman is a woman. Except, of course, for the census. Did you notice the furore this last week where they wanted to get trans people separately identified in the census? And you want to go, well, hang on a minute. If you're a male to female transition, then aren't you just a woman now?
Well, that's what I saw. Adam Bant from the Greens saying trans people shouldn't be ignored on the census, and someone wrote straight back, "Isn't this what you wanted, kiddo?"
Yeah, absolutely. So there's some
how does that work?
Well, it's really interesting, and I think this is worth exploring a little bit more. So part of who we are now is this incredibly narcissistic we're breeding narcissists, aren't we? Where you want to go, I must be identified and I must be seen and I must be recognized. And I wanted to be just like the women, but but now I'm separate to them. I must be in a separate category. So again, it's as we think through who we are as people, and again, I want the Bible to be informing me that either I'm going to take the way that I'm created and go, there's something good about that. And when there's aberrations from it, we want to help people, not just lean into the aberration. So either that's the way, or I just make it up for myself. And what you've got now is a judge going, well, basically, the law says everyone gets to make it up for themselves. So who am I to say no? Yeah. So if she says she's a woman, she's a woman.
Yeah. We'll do terrible things to people on the basis of the fact that it's legal in the future. That's what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Which is no laughing matter for a Tickle versus
Very
Giggle,
good.
Right?
Now, can I just say, Steve, it's not all downhill from here. One of the things that the judge does note in the case is that both Tickle and Giggle they didn't put up the best arguments themselves. On a number of occasions, the Giggle team basically went, well, we just don't agree with the Sex Discrimination Act. Rather than actually arguing it through. Tickle's team didn't do the best job with some stuff either. So there is some scope here for some proper arguing through of this stuff. But I don't see how we're going to end up any other way than where we've ended up here.
Yeah, I think so. No laughing matter.
No laughing matter. You keep pushing it in, and there it is.
I keep waiting for you to laugh about it, but here we are.
That's right.
So we'll move on. We'll wrap up in a minute. Really, what this is, what's underpinning some of this stuff, the iceberg under the tip, so to speak.
Let's turn to that now. So, Steve, we talked about abortion. We've talked about the whole transgender issue again, but underlying it, we keep making the point that it's about who we think we are and who tells us who we are. Let's just chat that one through for a minute. You were just a little bit earlier showing me an article by Ree Labadie called "Choose What You're Hated For." Just talk us through that one.
Yeah, Rhys Labadie, writing in a Substack article in the New Albion, said that when he was young, he was scorned for grace, like Jesus, my saviour, at school. But he said, you're more likely to be hated for nature now. And he said, it's very easy to think that you can, dial down what we believe about anthropology in order to get a gospel hearing. But Jesus is both our saviour and our creator. And the creeds say that. And that everything was made through him. So you won't be able to do that.
And for him as well.
So, yeah, sorry?
And for him, I wanted to add. So he in terms of an environment where we're thinking about, I own myself and I am my own ruler. No, yeah. I was made for Jesus.
And that's what I'd say is key. Is the key question, and Trevin Wax speaks about this as well, about anthropology being the issue. Anthropology is theological in its basis, that we aren't. It isn't just about our definition; it's about our direction. Who are we for, and which direction are we going in? And when that falls off the radar, I think Christians get stuck in the mire of arguing anthropology, or those questions around secular justice questions, rather than theological questions and where we're headed, our telos, our goal.
Right.
And once we get sucked into that, we're playing by the rules of another game.
That's right. And we're letting someone else set the agenda. Now, some of our peers are better at dealing with this than others. Again, last time we were with Carl Trueman, we were talking about why are the Roman Catholics so good about this? They kind of have this, I don't know, like the Roman Catholics are better at a lot of things, aren't they? Like their architecture seems to be better, their liturgy just seems to be more exciting. Not that I like it, but do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it's something there that means this is why on this stuff they get it better than we do.
A couple of things, yes. I think they pushed hard into the question 40 years ago while we were privatised as evangelicals with Jesus as my personal saviour, and we didn't have a public theology as well as put together as well. And I think Catholics did through John Paul II, particularly, and theology of the body, saw that coming. And we were going, oh, it'll be okay. We'll be able to navigate that one. And young, earnest evangelicals looking for something in the public square that is both brave and true have looked at Rome and gone, how come if their soteriology is so wrong, their public theology seems so right? And you see, I'm seeing a shift of people's, at least their affections, if not their actual movement to Rome on these issues.
That's right. I mean, I can remember when I did theological college a number of years ago now, a major ethics piece I did was on John Paul II's Evangelium Vitae. And it's an impressive piece of work. I mean, you don't agree with everything, but he's grappling with stuff. And we've also talked before about this whole transcendence issue as well. How does that fit into it? So is it maybe just, if I get my view better of kind of, spiritual cosmological reality, does that change the way I view these things?
Well, yeah, you've got to be careful not to mysticize everything, right? We're earthbound in one level, but we live in a universe that is, as I would say, a heaven above and a hell below and an earth in the middle, and they leak. Things move between them, right?
Right.
So if you can't have a cosmological perspective as a Christian that is tripartite, then you're going to be very earthbound in your ethical decisions. And you become pragmatic only. This is what we can do. And then you'll start to ignore things and you'll see the bracket creep. But if humans are not self-determining in the sense of I have defined who I am first and then everything else afterwards, you're going to arrive there. The point of Scripture is that we receive a meaning and identity and purpose. We don't simply create one for ourselves. And you see that on gender assigned at birth. Well, that's a self-identification issue rather than a received one.
Right, and you can see the way that played out with the thing we saw before. And so again, we're back to this point, aren't we, where Christians are going to start to be thinking in one way, and then the general population leaning towards another way, expressed perhaps in the laws that then they're appealing to. Like we said with Tickle versus Giggle, the judge basically went, "Well, this is the law now."
Yeah, But don't despair. Bad ideas don't work forever, right?
Sure, but they cause a lot of damage along the way, don't they?
Yeah, they do. So what I think you need to do is be ready to speak out to things and be ready to embrace people who say, this has broken me.
Yeah.
I don't want it to be, come to us and we'll shame you. I want it to be, come to Jesus and he forgives us. Yeah. This is what some of you were.
Yeah.
And what fruit came of the things of which you were now ashamed. Yeah. And we want to say, we're going to spend the rest of our lives sloughing off that shame of our old. And we want to be very gracious with people who come to us saying, I probably got this wrong. And we want to be very clear with people who say, it's just a storm in a teacup. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, and it would be lovely to have all the freedom to do that, wouldn't it, Steve? But it just seems to me that we're no closer in Australia to a proper religious discrimination act. That one just got booted down for political reasons, essentially, a while ago. Mainly, it seems to me, and tell me if you think I'm right here, because the Labour Party is trying to keep both sides happy, completely happy on this, and there is no,
I think that's true.
there is no everybody's perfectly happy. Somebody's got to give, you know, can they allow there to be these two views existing at the same time?
I don't think they can hold. I think the Prime Minister does not want a divisive war about religion, and it is a war about religion in the sense of it's both religious perspectives. The secular perspective uses religious terminology to describe its opponents and to describe its vision of human flourishing. It's certainly smuggling out our words and using them against us. And I don't think there can be long term because we don't have the same foundation.
Right.
Something will give, and the church may suffer as a result, and there will be damage caused, but that does not mean we should back down.
That's right. And so, well, I just keep coming back to Chamberlain, right, in the run up to the Second World War, and this desperate desire to hold everything together. And almost in the face of, because you've seen that even this week on Twitter, the whole, who's the bad guy? Is it Hitler or is it Churchill? And you kind of go, no, it's probably the guy trying to invade all the other countries. That's probably the bad guy. And as much as you kind of want to go, let's try and find a major way this work. Ultimately, if it's just a space is always being invaded, if it's always my way or the highway, ultimately it comes down to a fight, doesn't it?
Well, you saw it in the protests after George Floyd, where Churchill was a racist, sprayed by left-leaning people on statues of Churchill.
Yeah.
And then I hear right-leaning people, the hard right in America, saying maybe Hitler wasn't so bad after all. So you lay the groundwork for Hitler wasn't so bad after all, ironically, when you spray Churchill statues with Churchill was a racist.
Yeah.
You've got no framework for actually making any moral judgment at all.
Historical revisionism is utterly indiscriminate, isn't it? In that sense, especially
from people who are ahistorical, who haven't a clue even when the First or Second World War was fought.
It goes both ways.
Don't let me.
No, you're right. That's right. So, what do we do coming out of this, Steve? So we've had a chat about get your anthropology right. Recognize things for what they are, see where sort of the cultural thing and the societal thing is going. But what are Christians to be doing now as we think about these things? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think we need to be clear in the public square that we have a different understanding of what it means to be human, and that when we have political ability to say we will temper things. I'm not a Christian nationalist, so I'm not going to say that, in fact, there's all sorts of problems there. And that's what a lot of people are careful of. If we put Christians in and they vote for things that the Gen Pop disagrees with, what happens? They get voted out, I suspect. And that's the way it is. So I think it's a losing battle at one level, but you don't have to. You can abide the long defeat and still stand up for truth, because we do believe that Jesus will come one day and bring justice and righteousness to all those without a voice.
So I'm not actually hanging out ultimately for the government to get this right. It'd be nice if they could do, but there will be a day when it all gets sorted.
Yeah, and that's the thing. When you take God out of the equation, something must become God. And in our context, it's politics.
It is. And so we just got to decide who our God is going to be, because it's going to be the God who sets the agenda on who we are as humans, ultimately, which is, I think, the point that we were making right at the start. Choose your God, choose your view, therefore, of humanity. Christians, which is it going to be?
Couldn't have put it better myself. Wish I had. Thanks, Dave.